We are now live. Man, that's really low. That's like looking up my nose. Let me see if I can get it like this. And hopefully we can keep it there and it'll just look like that. All right, I'm taping this session, so no names. Again, we looked at a letter from Frederick Douglass to Harriet Tubman. And now we're going to look at an autobiography about himself, Frederick Douglass, his autobiography. Now, along with that, we're going to do some assignments. I think we have 3 assignments set to go. Mr. Neiman, are we going to do all 3 of these assignments by the end of the 9 weeks? The answer is no. These three assignments will bridge from first semester to second semester. However, the first assignment we do, which is vocabulary, will be graded for this 9 weeks. So just a heads up. If you've ever asked Mr. Neiman, how do I bring my grade up? Mr. Neiman, can I do extra credit? Mr. Neiman, how can I improve my grade? This is the answer. This is the answer. Do this and do it correctly. And guess what? I guarantee your grade comes up. Last time we did vocabulary, I think it was out of 15 points, maybe 16. This time it's out of 24. So the points have increased, but so has the workload. Not by much, but you'll see it here in a minute. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to share my screen. When I share my screen, you're going to see the vocabulary up. Then we're going to go to the actual autobiography. And I'll read some of that. We'll talk through that a little bit, and then I'll turn it over to you to read the rest. So here we go. I'm going to share my screen. I want this to be shared. I'm going to pull out my participants and pull out my chat just in case. No problem, Nix. All good. And for some reason, Brianna, it was, well, that's okay. I can use first names. It was saying that you were joining, but you weren't joining. Like maybe it was your internet or something. So all good. What you see in front of you is vocabulary. Now you say, Mr. Neiman, we've done this before. You're right. We had done this before. But if you'll recall, I did the top one and I gave you an example. So if you ever need to know how we're supposed to do this, if you ever like just completely lose your mind, have amnesia or something, you can go back to that original one that we did for my friend Douglas. You can go back to that and look what you're supposed to do. So here we go. First and foremost, we know that this comes in 3 parts. Part 1, day 1, is knowing what part of speech it is and also doing the definition. Day 2 is synonyms and antonyms. And then day 3 is probably the toughest, which is use that word in a sentence, build context for it, and then type that sentence. Some of you did a great job. Others, you typed into Google, use this word in a sentence, and you copied and pasted it, which I picked up on, by the way. So let's try not to do that this time. I gave you points for being resourceful. If you'll notice, day 1, some of you guys missed this, and this is a quick way to miss points. Not good. If you think divest is a noun, you would type noun under there. If you think divest is a verb, you would type verb in there. If you think it's an adjective, you would type adjective, and you would do that for all 6 words. Do yourself a favor and don't forget that. That is quick negative points right out the gate. So make sure you do that. And then, of course, as always, do not copy and paste a dictionary definition if you have no clue what it means. If you do not understand what your definition is, don't type it in there. You need to know what these words mean. Very important. I have found, and I can tell you that students in the past who have bought into my suggestion have said that it does work. So if you really want to know what a word means, go into the story, find where it is. And it should be, I think on yours it says page 26 and page 39. It should say line 26 and line 39. I apologize for that. Go into those lines and get a feel for what the sentence is talking about. Get a feel for what that paragraph is talking about. If you do that, you will have a better understanding of what that word means. Again, I go back to a couple students in years past. They have truly said, thank you for that suggestion. We appreciate that. Now, granted, it's only a handful, but for those handful, it worked. And I'm telling you, if you're struggling, it might work for you. Next up.
Make sure that you read how the word is being used in the sentence.
Yep.
Because a word could be used as a noun, a verb, an adjective. Sometimes it depends. So you need to actually read, see how it's being used, determine the part of speech, and then your definition is based off of that. So you have to do that first step first.
100%. That is an absolutely great call. Thank you, Ms. Thompson. Knowing that we in the English language turn a noun into a verb, a lot of times is frustrating to me. My daughter will ask me, well, did you text her? Did I send a text message? Is that what you asked? No, did you text her? Well, text is a noun. You can't verb a noun. I don't know. Anyway, that's the English language arts in me. Whatever. We do it all the time, though, and I think that's what the main point, Ms. Thompson's point, is the idea of know what part of speech you're working with. All right. So now that we've got that out of the way, we're waiting for day 2, which will be Tuesday, synonyms and antonyms. And then day 3, you might be thinking is Wednesday, but it's actually Thursday. We will come back and we will work together on this on Thursday, and I will introduce a new assignment that I think I'm going to make due Sunday night as opposed to Friday night because it is kind of difficult. So it's difficult because we haven't really full bore gone into something. So I'll get to that later. Day 1, day 2, and day 3. Now, what are we basing these words? Where are we finding these words? Well, these words are found in the Autobiography of Frederick Douglass. I'm going to read this first page and these first 2 lines, and I'll talk a little bit about it. I'll go over it, clarify some things, and then it's going to be your responsibility to read that page, the second page, third page, and then half this page. So 3.5 pages you're reading. Not a big deal. But the beauty of this is, and I want you to really pay attention to this, Frederick Douglass was intentionally stopped or intentionally prevented from being taught. He was told people were told they're not allowed to teach Frederick Douglass, and Frederick Douglass was told, we can't have you in a learning environment. Can't happen. Cannot have that happen. Frederick Douglass, as you read through this entire thing, think to yourself, he was probably the equivalent of 4th, 5th, or even 6th grade before he realized he knew he could read, like before he started really going after reading. So 4th, 5th, and 6th grade. I know if you're a student within the sound of my voice, you were learning to read in kindergarten, 1st, and 2nd grade. Those 3. So you have as many as 4 years on Frederick Douglass. With that in mind, I want you to pay attention to how he writes. I use the word eloquent in the first 2 periods, and I think that's a good way to put it. It's very proper, it's very thought out, very reasonable. It's incredibly impressive for an individual who did not learn to read and write until maybe 4th or 5th grade. So as we go through this, let's think about that as we're reading through his words. So here we go. I'm going to read this first introduction part, and then I'm going to read through the first paragraph. So Frederick Douglass, born 1818 and died 1895, was born into enslavement in Maryland at a time when slavery was legal in many states in the Union. As Douglass grew up, he tried to escape several times. Finally, in 1838, he succeeded. Douglass went on to become a famous speaker and writer. Hey, real quick, in the chat, what do we call someone who is a famous speaker? What's the word we use when we try to identify someone as a speaker? Someone who gets paid to make speeches? What do we call that person? First one to get it wins. What do we call someone who does public speaking for a living? Not everybody at once. Does anybody remember what that was?
Oh, what is that word? Oh, no.
Oh. NB, that is not correct.
Oh, if I could only remember the word.
Oh my. Yes. Yes. Great job, TP. Nice work. Orator is the word. Way to go. That is absolutely correct. So Frederick Douglass becomes a famous orator and writer fighting to abolish or end slavery. And we knew that that's what abolish meant. His autobiography, and this is the entire title of his autobiography, Narrative of the Life of Frederick Douglass, an American Slave, became a bestseller not only in the United States, but also Europe. Now, quick point of note, as you saw, we only have 5 pages in front of us. I don't know how many pages Narrative of the Life of Frederick Douglass, an American Slave is, but let's pretend it's 500. We only have 5 pages. They just pulled one little section out and gave it to us here, which is fine because as you grow older, you might be asked to read larger portions of, you might be asked to read the whole thing in college, who knows? But I can tell you this, we have a small snippet and it's worth its weight in gold here.
It is 110 pages.
Holy smokes, they must use font 14, clearly. So what'd you say, 110?
Yeah.
110 pages and we have 5. So I'm not real good at math, but that's just under 5% of this his entire narrative we have in front of us. So here we go. As you read, consider why Frederick Douglass chose these particular events to write about. Think about what his focus on these events reveals about his character and his struggle to freedom. Now, along with that thought, that focus point, I want you to also think about the fact that he did not learn to read and write until he was 4th or 5th grade, what we would call 4th and 5th grade. We're talking 8 or 9, maybe 10 years old. He is just now learning the principle that these letters have sounds assigned to them. And if you group letters with other letters, you make words. And if you group words together, they make sentences. Sentences build paragraphs, and paragraphs build chapters. So he's just learning that in the 4th and 5th grade. So it says, I lived in Master Hugh's family. Now, real quick, if you'll notice, it's an autobiography. Therefore, he wrote it. Therefore, he is writing the letter I, and it means him, number one. But notice that it's capitalized. Interesting. Anywho, I lived in Master Hugh's family about 7 years. During this time, I succeeded in learning to read and write. In accomplishing this, I was compelled to resort to various stratagems, which means he had different strategies he used in order to learn to read. We do the exact same thing when we answer questions. We use a particular strategy. For us, it's RACE. That strategy helps us answer. He uses strategies in order to learn to read and write. I had no regular teacher. My mistress, who had kindly commenced to instruct me, had, in compliance with the advice and direction of her husband, not only ceased to instruct, but had set her face against my being instructed by anyone else. It is due, however, to my mistress to say of her that she did not adopt this course of treatment immediately. She at first lacked the depravity indispensable for shutting me up in mental darkness. It was at least necessary for her to leave some training in the exercise. It is at least necessary for her to have some training in the exercise of irresponsible power to make her equal to the task of treating me as though I were a brute. Now, first and foremost, if we go back to line 10, it says that the mistress first lacked the depravity indispensable to shutting me up in mental darkness. Couple things here. What he's saying is she was nice, and she did not have the ability to be mean. And Frederick Douglass is saying, by shutting me into mental darkness, that's a mean thing to do. And she did not have that ability. However, it was at least necessary for her to have some training in the exercise of irresponsible power. That means she was trained or told or taught by her husband how this should happen. And she eventually, over time, came to the idea that, okay, I'm not supposed to not only teach you, but I'm also not allowed to let you learn. It's not enough that I don't teach you because somebody else could. That is also what I have to prevent. Very intense stuff here. So your job right now is, I did not want to do that, I wanted to stop share, bang. Your job right now is in Google Classroom, you have the text in the folder that you were just reading, that I was just reading from. That that text is available to you as well as the vocabulary. So today, your job is to do the vocabulary. First off, you need to read the story, then go back and do the vocabulary. That's what you need to do today. So if you say to yourself, Mr. Neiman, I've seen the vocabulary and you explained it well here. I would like to go on my own and read and complete this assignment for today. You are free to go. If you say, I'm not really sure what he's asking here, stick around. Feel free to ask questions. I have zero issue with you asking questions. So at this time,
I would recommend reading through it at least a little bit, get a feel for the writing. It is a little complicated, but if you take your time and pay attention, you should have no problem. But look it over before you go so you can ask us while we're here. And definitely, if you find that you need help, come to the office hours.
I'll share my screen one last time in the fact that if you'll notice that word depravity had a little 1 above it, it's a footnote, and they give you the definition underneath. Anytime that you have an issue, and the bold are usually written in the margin, here's a number 2 for chattel. You notice that it's property or slave, chattel, if you will, chattel. So ultimately, there are things, sorry, I was trying to be funny. There are things that are at your disposal, and we want you to take it upon yourself to access those. However, sometimes you reach your limit and you need help, and it's okay to ask. So feel free to ask those questions, and you may begin now.